Marvel's Midnight Suns was first announced in August of last year, and to say that it drew my interest would be a massive understatement. I've been a fan of Marvel Comics since I was 12 years old, and I count several of this studio's games among my all-time favorites. So ever since we got those few glimpses into the game, I've been waiting somewhat patiently to learn more. Of course, some saw one particular aspect of the game and reacted less enthusiastically. Well, today I'm happy to say that I've had a chance to get some hands-on time playing the game and will do my best to share what that was like. We'll talk about ways you can tailor your experience playing the game to suit your own taste, how the combat plays out, what it's like to hang out with Marvel superheroes, and more. Before we dig into all that, I should just explain that possibly the biggest surprise I had when I played Midnight Suns was that the initial trailers and streams actually showed the basic elements of a lot of what I saw when playing. It's just that the experience of being hands-on and seeing how it flows was so different from seeing the various mechanisms in isolation. As a result, I've approached this preview a lot differently from what I normally would, and have tried to focus more on the things that affected how I felt when I was playing, in the hopes that you could see whether you'd be likely to enjoy it or not. Hopefully, we can at least show you enough today to get a sense of whether this is something you'd be interested in, and we can save more detailed conversations about specific sections of the game for future videos. At this point, you're probably aware that Midnight Suns uses cards in a deck builder format to drive combat. You'll typically draw 6 cards and can play 3, although a lot of card effects can change both of those conditions. We also have the ability to redraw any 2 cards each turn, and this can come in very handy. Now, so far, that all sounds pretty vanilla, right? Well, the devil and the fun is in the details. The single biggest thing that sets the combat in this game apart from other deck builders is that it does not take place on a 2D map. The heroes fight on a 3D grid-based map, and this opens up a whole new world of tactical options. You can knock one enemy back into another for extra damage, and some powers can be shot in a line across the map, hitting everyone in their path. There are also items that you can knock enemies into for extra damage, or pick up and throw at them. The mantra for the development team was "the environment is your playground," and even in the early stages of the game, you see that shine through. But taking advantage of all these options means putting some real thought into positioning yourself on the map. Now, to help with that, the heroes get one free move each turn, and there are also ways to incorporate movement into your attacks themselves to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And of course, like any deck builder, you're going to have many variations in what the cards do that will force you to prioritize in what order to play them, which enemies to target first, etc. Now, this is just barely scratching the surface of the combat system, but doing it justice will probably take another 20 to 30 minutes. So I'm going to just focus on a couple of points for the moment, and then upload a separate video within the next few days where we'll dig into all the details I can think of, along with specific examples of video footage so you can see it for yourself. First, I want to correct a misimpression that the developers may have given in the original announcement videos. They said at the time that you control the hunter and not the Marvel heroes directly. But that is only true at the Abbey. Out here on the combat maps, you will control Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and the rest of the gang. And all of them are beautifully animated in a way that perfectly fits each of their personalities and brings the attacks to life in a way that I found incredibly satisfying. I also appreciated that even early in the game, there were some unique cards that had seriously cool effects which strongly represented that specific character. I guess what I'm trying to say in my own long-winded way is that when I was immersed in the combat, I felt very much as though I was Ghost Rider, Blade, or whomever, desperately trying to use my wits to get out of the mess we were in. In other words, it was very much like controlling characters that I love in the same type of situation that they'd be in if I were reading a comic or watching one of their movies. And that's exactly what I want from a Marvel game. It's not in the package that I expected, but I'll be damned if it doesn't work, at least for me. Alright, this may sound lame to some people, but a significant part of Midnight Suns revolves around making friends with Marvel superheroes. And I'm going to admit right now that when I played Fire Emblem's Three Houses, the sheer volume of social interaction with the students was a little overwhelming to me and helped push me away from a game where I mostly just wanted to play more battles. Well, apparently, I am a shallow nerd who just needed those students to be swapped out for a bunch of folks wearing brightly colored spandex because in my time playing this game, I took every chance I could to soak up every single conversation and still wanted more. And believe me when I say that there is a lot of talking here. As with combat, this is also a topic that I'll do a deep dive video for in the near future, but for starters, it's pretty common that you'll walk into the common room and find conversations already going on which you can listen to. You can choose to talk to anyone at any time and get a couple of snippets of dialogue. There are text messages you can read and respond to. Opportunities for more substantial discussions are flagged so you can pursue them. Once a day, you can share an activity like watching a movie or going for a walk on the grounds with one of the heroes and have a nice chat. Now, there are still more options, but I think you get the idea, and I'll save the rest for that future video. So yeah, there's a lot of chances to bond with your hero homies if you want to. At a minimum, I recommend the activities because they really help you build friendship. And if you don't enjoy it, you can always bounce out of the cutscene and minimize your time commitment. And making friends with a hero unlocks abilities that get progressively more powerful as you level up that relationship. So there are significant practical benefits to this as well. But here's the thing. This stuff is really well written. It's not just that I enjoyed the banter with characters that I knew well, like Tony Stark. I also really enjoyed my time with Nico Minoru, even though I wasn't familiar with her at all prior to the game. And probably the biggest surprise to me was how often the humor landed and would make me smile or even chuckle. There were quite a few lines that cracked me up, and the voice actors did a universally fantastic job of delivering them. And while I'm on the voice cast, let me just add that every one of them is spot on and does a great job getting across their characters' personalities and feelings of the moment. Listen, your mileage may vary, but I would suggest at least giving this part of the game a serious try. If you're a Marvel fan, I just don't know how many chances you're going to get to feel like you're really a part of this universe and get to know these characters on a one-on-one basis. Even knowing that I had a limited time to play and I desperately wanted to get to a promised boss mission, I found myself constantly exhausting every dialogue option because I was enjoying it so much. Honestly, I never knew that in the depths of my cynical old heart there lived the soul of a hero-worshipping fangirl, but there you have it. The developers describe the Abbey and its grounds as another character in the game. It serves as both headquarters and homestead for the Midnight Suns, and stop me if you've heard this before, but there's a lot to see and do here. In addition to the socializing we've already talked about, there are also some purely practical activities. The Forge is where Doctor Strange and Tony Stark research both new abilities and upgrades to existing ones, as well as new facilities for the Abbey. The Yard is where Blade waits to train the Hunter. We can upgrade our abilities, and you can also spar with other heroes. Sparring offers combat bonuses, as well as a friendship boost with the character you pair up with. The War Room is manned by Captain Marvel, and she'll talk about upcoming mission priorities. In the Hunter's bedroom, you can sometimes find the pet Hellhound, Charlie. Here's a tip. Give Charlie a pet whenever you can. You'll build up a relationship with her, and she can actually be summoned to help during some combat missions and is pretty darn handy. Now, beyond the basics I've mentioned, and again there are more, the grounds start to open up in the early game, and you can start exploring the area outside the Abbey in earnest. Now, unfortunately, I only had a short time to do this, but the developers promise a whole list of rewards for spending time out there. For starters, there's a story that plays out which is related to the main characters, but at the same time separate from the primary story of the game. We'll also be able to unlock cosmetics and gameplay rewards that you can't get elsewhere. All of this is optional, but it's there if you want to pursue it. Marvel's Midnight Suns is a unique game with many parts. We've seen most of those parts in other games, but never combined quite like this. And I think it's important to understand that it's structured so that you can put about as much or as little effort into any one of them as you want. For example, if you love the idea of spending time with Marvel characters and developing your own hero alongside them, but don't really care for tactical combat, especially when it's turn-based, then there's a difficulty setting that lets you play in story mode and cruise through missions with a minimum of effort. On the other hand, if you love strategizing your way to glory and really enjoy a good challenge, there are a lot of higher difficulty levels you can unlock where enemies will be significantly buffed and your margin for error will be much smaller. Between all of the choices available on the combat map and the decisions you make about upgrading or modifying your abilities, there's a lot to sink your teeth into if you're willing to invest the time. And I would say the same thing about developing friendships with the heroes and exploring the Abbey and its grounds. There are rewards for doing them, but you could strategically invest a minimal amount of time in friendships, for example, and still get some pretty huge gains if you don't want to get bogged down in that part of the game. Now, I want to be very clear on this. I am not saying that the biggest strength of this game is that you can skip huge chunks of it. For my part, I thoroughly enjoyed the socializing and the combat, and I'm looking forward to playing both, as well as spending more time trying out the other aspects of Midnight Suns. But I do want you to know that if some aspects of the game appeal to you a lot more than others, then that doesn't necessarily make this a bad fit for you. Obviously, the more of those individual pieces that you enjoy, then the better fit it will be, but I wouldn't feel like it necessarily needs to be a hard no simply because you're not into one segment of it. These days, it's increasingly uncertain when a long-time IP is adapted for a new project, whether the characters and world will be presented in a way that fans can relate to, or if their names and likenesses will be stamped on characters that bear little if any resemblance to those we've come to know and love. And if they manage to get the basics right, the next question is whether the creators have enough knowledge and understanding to capture the essence of the world as a whole and make us feel like they really get it. As someone who has had a decades-long relationship with comic books as well as a fan of many of the movies, I set the bar fairly high on this score and would have been sorely disappointed if Firaxis had failed to deliver. Now, overall, I was happy on this front, but I'll give you some specific examples on both sides of the fence. First, let's get some obvious facts out of the way. This game is not 100% faithful to every story ever written in the 60 years of Marvel continuity. And the story is not a beat-for-beat retelling of the original from the 90s. I think it's fair to say that it's inspired by that series rather than based on it. And all of this is in line with what I would expect. There were a few moments that made me scratch my head, though. For example, Dr. Faustus has generally been portrayed as a villain who uses psychology to manipulate others to his will, but here he's orchestrating the supernatural resurrection of an ancient demon. It's not a huge deal to me, but it was a little jarring, and I am a little surprised that a villain with more supernatural roots wasn't used instead. Now that said, Faustus was by far the biggest disconnect I had in my time playing, and the heroes were all spot on. Spider-Man feels like Spider-Man to me. Blade feels like Blade, and so on. Every detail of their lives may not be the same stories as you have experienced before, but from what I saw, they will talk, act, move, and fight like the people you expect them to be. But let's go past that. From the time I found out that this was based on the Midnight Suns event, I wanted to know if we would get to see the original Ghost Rider, Johnny Blaze, with a shotgun that spews hellfire, because that's how he was portrayed at that time, and I literally had this question in my notes to ask Firaxis. And then in the opening cutscene, what should I see but Johnny Blaze blasting away? So good. Now, I know that this is just one moment, and it may not mean much to anyone who doesn't know that history, but it helped set the tone for me right from the start. And it suggests that the developers understand the core of what made the original Midnight Suns storyline badass. And there were just countless other little Easter eggs, references, and nice moments peppered throughout that convinced me we're getting a genuinely marvelous experience. In closing, let me just say that Marvel's Midnight Suns is a game that is absolutely packed with things to do. My fear was that it would have taken a much longer video if I tried to describe all of it in any level of detail, and also that the understanding of how it feels to play would have been buried under the weight of information overload. I'm sure there was a way to do it, but I couldn't see it. So I hope you'll forgive me for the fact that there are many details that I didn't have a chance to get into, and instead try to focus on the experience of playing in the hopes that this would ultimately be more helpful, and I only hope that you find it to be so. I'm also well aware that as a longtime fan of both the Marvel Universe and turn-based tactical games, I'm almost perfectly aligned to love a game like this if it's well executed, and so far I do. I also realize that not everyone who watches this video will be able to say the same, and your mileage may vary, which is fair enough. If you've seen enough today to think that Midnight Suns might be worth your time and hard-earned money, then know that I will be covering this game up through the launch in early October and beyond. And having spent a lot of this video trying to convey what drove my feels, we'll be leaving that behind for the most part as we do deep dives into areas such as combat in the coming days. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching. I hope we see you next time.